I'd like to call this informational meeting of Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 to order. And as we always do, we start out with council remarks. Any council remarks today? Seeing none, we'll jump into our first presentation of the downtown ramp here at Quebec.
I have technical assistance today, so Director Cotter is assisting me. Thank you so much, Erica Beck, Chief of Staff for the Mayor Tenhaken. We have two parts to this presentation today, and the first is just a very brief message from me regarding our development path forward. And then the second is going to be to outline temporary improvements that we are proposing to make to the site. And Mark Cotter is going to handle that portion of the presentation because he's had a team of people that have been working on that. While I'm speaking about the development path forward, I have a video that you can watch if you'd like, because I'm not necessarily sure all of us have had the opportunity to be in the new ramp or see views of the ramp even as you are on the upper deck, which I feel kind of add to the value of the ramp in and of itself and the development opportunity that's ahead of us. And so while this video is playing, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our path forward. Our intent is to target an announcement in October or November of this fall that we will be soliciting interest in this development opportunity again. We have an internal team formed, of which Councillor Selberg is going to be working with us, participating on, that will take care of the due diligence that's needed prior to the announcement actually occurring. Over the next 3 months, that's how much time we have, we will be getting an updated appraisal of this site so that we can educate our interested parties on what the appraised value of the site is. We'll be working with industry leaders that may have questions regarding this site, because I think many of them do, with regard to the site capacity, development expectations that we as a city might have for them, construction considerations that they might have questions regarding, including staging of a future project, how that might work with 10th Street and so forth, or existing property owners, and then including better understanding how this structure was built and any intricacies that they need to be aware of. In addition to that, and very importantly, we will continue to meet with the Public Parking Board, just like we did yesterday, and all of you, to make sure that we answer your questions and then ultimately get your feedback as we move forward, because I do think it's exceptionally critical that when we solicit interest again, we are all on the same page and we are all confident in what our expectations are, because quite frankly, the development community wants to know that. In order to give them the confidence to seek out and respond with ideas and things that they believe would be good additions to downtown and that we want to ultimately partner with them on, they need to have confidence that we're all on the same page. So I do have 2 additional informational meetings on your calendars right now. The next one will be July 26th, and then I have another in September after budget hearings are over. And the importance of those, especially with this next one, I want to outline for you different approvals that you will ultimately be asked to make or give consideration to in order to move the project forward. And then also talk about some questions regarding the site. What are all of your expectations regarding the development of this property, and in terms of the development on top of the ramp and on the side of the ramp? What are you hearing from people in the community? What do they want to see as part of this development? In addition to that, we're going to talk about does the council have concerns with what type of opportunities might be brought forward and what you want to see the administration do in terms of seeking out due diligence from interested parties moving forward. So we want to address all of those questions, and we'll start doing that on the 26th when I come back. And then I'm hopeful that by September 13th, I think is the next informational meeting, we'll have had some of those education sessions with industry leaders, developers, hoteliers, really anyone interested in learning a little bit more about the future opportunities that exist on this site, and we can share that information with you, along with the results of the 2035 downtown market study at that time. And then hopefully we'll have our appraisal results by that time as well, and we can have a good conversation on how we're going to move forward. In the meantime, though, We're going to talk about short-term temporary improvements to this site. We've had a number of property owners and even folks just that frequent downtown on a regular basis ask us, when are you going to do something with that site so that the dirt doesn't blow quite so much? And so that's one of the things that we've been working on, in addition to ideas that we are generating with regard to the facade and how to beautify that in a very temporary but way that's honoring of downtown and ultimately what we want visitors in our community to think of when they think of downtown and specifically this site. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to talk about the temporary improvement plan, and then if you have any questions after that, we'll be here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and Council members. We've got just a few slides for you. The plan that we want to bring forward to you tonight was really pulled together from the Mayor's Office, Planning, Finance, Public Works. Also, Sioux Falls Arts Council weighed in and gave us some direction. And so as you go through this tonight, write down your ideas. We haven't started anything, so we can certainly still incorporate them and ultimately activate the site. So, all right. So, as Erica said, in this interim period between now and the development of the site on the ultimate development, we'd like to activate this area. There's a large open space between 10th Street and the facade or the face of the ramp. So, we'd like to create a public space to gather and recreate. I'd like to paint a temporary mural on the parking ramp facade, and then also install a plaza for walking, sitting, informal games, and small performances. We would do this through softening the landscape. Today there's concrete footings, backfill with sand. There's some building utilities within that footing space. We'd soften the landscape with a mix of temporary field turf and painted asphalt surface. We've had really successful conversations with Mammoth Sports Construction that they are willing to gift and install. You'll see some images here in the next slides that will show some turf. That would be a part of that. So the temporary field turf and a painted asphalt surface. We would buffer the activated space with some streetscape elements. There's a number of them, like, for example, flower planters that Parks has in their 49th Street shop that we could bring up. There's some of those concrete planters that local artists could actually paint and kind of activate those. And then furnish the space with some painted wire spools, more opportunities for local artists to kind of jazz up this space. This just gives you more of a broader view of the ideas. These ideas were put together by Mike Patton. He's in the Parks team. He's a landscape architect, just to help us visualize some of these ideas. The idea would be there's a parking lane along 10th Street where food trucks could park. And then, you know, this shows kind of that pedestrian view of what it would look like if we're able to essentially paint a mural on that lower 15 to 20 feet of the facade wall to really kind of activate it and encourage people to come near it. And then it's a little bit better picture here to actually look down on some of the site improvements. So as we work through a couple of options with Mammoth Sports, as they contemplated a gift of the turf, one thing that would work best for them is if the entire site was paved with a temporary asphalt surface. Just from an installation time frame and a maintenance of it, that would work best. So our street team is working closely with the Parks team to make sure we can make that happen. So this is the sky view essentially of what those improvements would look like. You can see the face of the ramp and then ultimately where the cars are parked along 10th Street. The pictures along the top are just what some repurposed wire spools would look like. The two pictures that flank the bottom are other activated spaces in other communities that we just wanted to pull in and give you a perspective of what that might look like. And then the center picture in the lower level, that's right on Phillips Avenue with those large planters. So again, the goals for the activated space really create a inviting mural and plaza that would attract people to the space for walking, sitting, informal games, and small performances. Improve the aesthetics and soften the landscape by painting the lower 15 feet of the parking structure wall. Install a mix of field turf, painted asphalt, and furnishings and buffers. And then engage sponsors and local artist community through the partnership with the Sioux Falls Arts Council, and Kellen Boyce, the executive director, is here. We also want you to know that we've shared this plan with the River Center, those neighbors, and the Great Outdoor Store, and they've given us some very positive feedback about what's contemplated here for some temporary improvements. So with that, we're here to answer your questions. I'll probably go back to this slide. Our team's here, so if you've got some questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate the fact that we're forward-looking on getting something done there. Council, questions? Councilor Neitzer.
Two things. First thing is, obviously, this looks like very tactical urbanism, as you would call it. So just looking at other communities will give us, I'm sure, plenty of ideas. So this is a good start. As far as the murals, we seem to have really good success with painting of the storm drains. So we put out basically a contest and people submit their submissions, and then the Visual Arts Commission decides which ones are best, and then they award it. Have we thought about potentially, whether it's one big one or maybe you could have a whole line of them or something like that, of just putting it out there and just seeing what people come up with, and then maybe we award them the materials and they just do it? Or have you thought about how you're going to execute the mural part?
We have. We've confided with Kellen Boyce several times. The idea to just show this image was just to say there would be some consistent theme. It necessarily wouldn't be that. As I understand it, there'd be a call to engage the local artists, and then really what Sioux Falls Arts Council would do is they would select those that are qualified to do the work, and then they would ask for their ideas and ultimately find a way to kind of stitch them all together. And so, yeah, that's really why we want to partner with them and have a good themed mural. So I think we could see, 3 to 8 different artists out here. And then there could be multiple ones doing things like, almost like the storm drain, where they're smaller, isolated projects like the wire wheels and the planters and things of that nature.
Okay. Very similar conceptually, just a matter of using the Visual Arts Commission and then getting the arts community to bring their best ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, Council? Councilor McCares?
My first question is for Chief of Staff Beck. When thinking about the process that you laid out and so forth, and don't want to relitigate the whole past anything, but also want to make sure that learning and understanding as we move forward, can you share 1 or 2 things that you think is really positive about the request for proposal process, and 1 or 2 reasons why you think the request for proposal process is not the right way to move forward?
Request for proposal versus negotiated sale.
Yeah.
I like the negotiated sale process because ultimately it allows us more flexibility. We're still getting a lot of people involved in the process, just like what we have and what you've seen experienced through the rail yard project, just as an example. I think, quite frankly, with respect to my history with the development community, the RFP process had a bit of a stigma to it, and we needed to change that stigma by coming up with, quite frankly, a different name and a different process. And ultimately, that's what we did. I do think the process has worked really well today. RFP processes work really well across the country, and we still continue to use them within other areas of city government, even when we're soliciting interests in different, projects and so forth. So it's not as though the RFP process is a broken process, but I do think that the timing, given this project and ultimately where we needed a new one to give more confidence to the development community that this wasn't going to be handled the same way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My final question would either one of you can answer it. The plan looks great. Love the concept and beautiful for downtown. I guess I've never seen government take something away very well. We say temporary in this room. Temporary isn't going to be heard outside of this room.
Yep.
And so the moment we spend $1 of public money on this, a temporary piece. In a year or two, when we're digging up dirt for the next piece, the community's gonna be going, what are we doing? We really like what we have now, and we don't want a building going there because we really like this open space there. So kind of an opinion / question of how do we make sure tactically we're sharing with the public that this is temporary?
Well, I think two things. First of all, I think that's been top of mind for all of us. If you've ever seen the mural that exists on the Falkton elevator, I know you know which one I'm talking about, Counselor Sale. It's beautiful, right? And if anything ever happened to that, there would be absolute, cry out from not probably just the community itself, but even the surrounding communities, just because, it's a sentimental attachment at this point. And so ultimately, one thing that's interesting that came up from the Public Parking Board yesterday is ensuring that people understand it's temporary by also utilizing this to some degree as a pilot space, right? We're going through the 2035 downtown plan right now. People are suggesting a lot of different types of open areas and community gathering spaces within that plan. So let's use this space to pilot some of those ideas, see what works, and then identify future opportunities for longer term investment moving forward. And all of us will have to be part of that messaging, quite frankly. And I think that there's probably some things that we can even do on site to make sure that there's messaging there, including with the art in and of itself, having some sort of, small signage or plaque saying, temporary space until such time that this project is completed, something of that nature that will help with that. But I think all of us, again, will have to be part of that message. Assuming that we hit this target of making this announcement and releasing this opportunity to the development community in October or November, I don't think it's not unreasonable to think that a development could be started in the fall of 2023. It's just really hard to say though, right? Because we have market conditions that we have to work with, and we certainly want to make sure that we're bringing forward the right project. So at best case scenario, I would say fall of 2023, that, this will exist through, and we will make sure that when we're communicating and we're talking about this project, we continue to say temporary short-term improvements, and we would ask that all of you do the same.
Thank you.
Other questions? Counselor Sauber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I appreciate so far the team effort that's been made as we try to transition here to hopefully an announcement here as we get to the fall and improve the aesthetics and the landscaping on that building. I think it was put well. I think a lot of due diligence is being paid and will be for the next 3 months, so we get off on the right foot and go in the right direction here. I don't know, maybe we can share with the folks a little bit about what we're doing to maybe engage sponsors a little bit with this. I know we've talked some about that, but there might be some interest in that. And then I think we also there's been some talk about, as we've talked about, what art might be on this, as Councilor Neitzer referred to. I think we're kind of maybe leaving that in the Arts Council's hands of people where this is their realm to maybe help make the decisions on what might go on here. Is that true? So.
Yes, and I think that's really our intent, to engage the Sioux Falls Arts Council. They've got the pulse on what the local businesses and the private commissioning and sponsorships that they're willing to do. And ultimately Kellen said the other day, they've got a distribution list to about 300 people of all different varying qualifications of artists that really, people have been looking at this wall for some time. And so she knows that there's some pinned up demand for people to bring their ideas forward and ultimately share them. And we hope that there's some private companies as well that would like to, put some dollars forward to help fund that artist work, so we can make this a true public space. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I appreciate the presentation and the efforts being made to kind of continue to communicate as we move through this in the next few months. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us. Oh.
Counselor Jensen?
Thank you, Counselor Sale, Chair Sale. And maybe this is just a comment, and I think I've talked to Counselor Selberg about it, definitely Counselor Sale about it, and Chief of Staff Beck about it. But as you look at this great piece of property that we do have, it's one of the most developable places in downtown Sioux Falls right now. So when you guys go into your into your conversations over the next 3 months, I would also encourage you to have a firm grasp of how you're going to underwrite whoever is going to be developing this. In my former life, there's a lot of ways to tie this property up and get it back as a city if, you know, someone doesn't actually come through and do what they say they're going to do. And furthermore, you know, we want to make certain that someone can perform on going up, you know, 14 stories and not just 3 stories in the middle of South Dakota. So as we continue to move forward, just making sure that we're partnering with the right, or we're selling this to someone that can actually get it done, would be, you know, one of my biggest pieces of input. And I will always, you know, fight for that, and have you guys will have the right people underwriting these individuals so that we get it done this time. So thank you.
Counselor Neitzer?
Just to add on to that, I've said this privately to Chief of Staff Beck, that kind of is along the same lines, that I just want to make sure let's do it right. If that means going slower, even if I have no you know, pride and ownership that this has to be done during my term. So if it happens after I'm gone, if that's the way that timing works, I want to see it done right. And let's just listen to the development community. I don't know with Sioux Steel and Sharapa coming online, if there's going to be maybe an absorption issue with all of the, you know, hotels and everything else coming online, if they're going to be, people are going to be ready to go, or if they need to let that settle a little bit. But in any event, let's do it. Let's go slower, if anything, and do it right, and just not force anything. And I know the administration shares that belief. So that's the only thing I just wanted to share.
Anything else, council? Well, I'd just like to say, from my viewpoint, I appreciate the fact that you look at the gravity of this situation as a legacy project for the administration and for some of us on the council. We'll all be going out together. I look forward to this. I think it's going to build Sioux Falls for the next 50 years. And I appreciate the fact that you're very inclusive of the council, and with Councilor Selberg in the room at all times, I'm sure he's going to represent us well. Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't know how you're going to top that, but let's get on to storm debris management.
Regan Smith, Emergency Manager, City of Sioux Falls. I also have members of the City Incident Management Team from Public Works, Parks, Finance, Fire, and also Janet from the Helpline Center. Thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to come and discuss the storm cleanup from the May and now June storms. 2022 obviously has been a very active storm season here in Sioux Falls. The city's multi-agency coordination team has responded to these events and others this year. We are composed of key members or employees from key departments and community members that come together in our Emergency Operations Center to coordinate that disaster response and recovery under the National Incident Management System framework. That unified command of this team leads and sets those incident objectives each time, and that command, the unified command, is made up of directors or their alternates from Public Works, Police, Fire, and sometimes other departments depending on what the nature of the scenario is. As we transition from a response to recovery, that command usually falls into a single command situation under Public Works. They get kind of stuck with the cleanup of that, and then we also bring in the Park Department as they're a major resource for doing some of that work. You know, no matter what the event is, the incident objectives are going to be pretty similar. We're always going to include life safety of the general public and our first responders, restoration of transportation, infrastructure restoration, and then overall recovery of the community. Every storm is a little bit different, so our strategy is kind of different for each storm also. Some of those factors that we're always looking at or that affect us are the time of year, the location within the city, whether it happens in the core or maybe out in some of the newer development, the intensity of the storm and of the debris. The expected operational duration, how long is this going to take us? The debris types and amounts, if it's just tree debris, or do we have construction material, flooded household items, contaminated sandbags following a flood, those type of things. And then finally, the availability of personnel and equipment, whether it's our own city resources, local contractors, or national storm chaser contractors. The city did develop a comprehensive debris management plan following the 2013 ice storm. We worked very closely with FEMA and then again the key departments, Public Works, Parks, and Finance and Emergency Management to develop that. It includes guidance on contracting, documentation, our overall operations, environmental and safety to ensure we are providing an efficient response and meeting FEMA public assistance programs, rules, and regulations. On this slide, you can see some of our recent history here in Sioux Falls. 2013 was probably the biggest event we've had as far as debris management. That ice storm was an $8 million event. $6 million of that was reimbursed by the state and FEMA. 2019 tornadoes, $1.5 million in debris cleanup. $1.3 million was reimbursed. And then this year, the May 12th storm, we estimate we've expended $200,000 to clean that up just for debris management. And then the Memorial Day, $142,000 is estimated. We're currently compiling the figures for the July 5th storm cleanup as that is ongoing, and we're collecting that. We have received a federal declaration for the May 12th storm for public assistance, and that includes the emergency response costs, debris management, any infrastructure damage that we sustain, and we're going to begin working with state and federal emergency management agency inspectors next week on those program reimbursement. Damages and the debris management outside that May 12th event aren't going to be eligible under this declaration. So the Memorial Day storm, the July 5th storm, they don't fall under that declaration incident period. We're being very extremely careful to separate the costs for those events when we're working through this with FEMA Public Assistance Program. Any cost or work that we submit to FEMA must be storm related and documented correctly to be eligible. If we're doing any work outside the scope of that incident or the federal regulations, that can really put a lot of what we've done as far as reimbursement in jeopardy. The Helpline Center, we've just had a great relationship with them. We've been working with the Helpline Center for just about 25 years now. Every major event that we have here in the city, the Helpline Center is there in support and part of our Emergency Operations Center. They are part of our public information section, operate the community's call center, coordinate volunteers, donations management, assist with the overall damage assessment, bring together all the nonprofit organizations here, and are a voice of support to those disaster victims that happen. Our disaster response, frankly, wouldn't be successful without the Helpline Center. The lessons that have been learned and the model that the Helpline Center's developed here in Sioux Falls is now being implemented across the state of South Dakota. Just some figures from the Helpline Center for the May and June numbers. As you can see, they've taken just about 800 total calls for storm response and recovery. 520 of those are information purpose or referral onto another agency. 278 of those are advocacy calls to report damage, requests for help, or to report down trees through the Helpline Center to the city. 93 homeowners have been assisted by volunteers through the work of the Helpline Center, and they've lined up 68 total volunteers for 400 hours of volunteer work. Next, I'll bring up Kelby Miras with the Park Department, and he'll discuss the park operation plans.
Thanks, Reagan. Good afternoon, City Council. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation. This slide shows you really the collaboration that goes into working events like this, from civic analytics to public works to Helpline Center that Reagan mentioned. This has given us real-time information on where the issues are as soon as the calls come in. Use our ViewWorks software so that our teams in the field can respond in real time and not have to wait for a list to be somehow communicated to them. But this dashboard and the use of this software system in these last 3 events has really been a game changer and really expedited for us storm damage response. While storm damage response is nothing new and is actually something that we have within our work plan, especially for our forestry crews, this year has been a little bit unique. These storms have been a little bit bigger, a little more widespread, and have dealt with some other utility infrastructure that we typically don't see in some of the storms that we deal with. All told, in the 3 storms, we have had about 1,000 different calls for service or work orders, and there's still about 100 that remain at this point. So, what do we do when there is a response? The question we get is, tree came down, is the city going to help me with this, or am I on my own? And what we have done historically is if a tree originates within the right-of-way, or within the boulevard in between the sidewalk and the curb, the city will address that tree regardless of the direction in which it fell. So if that tree falls onto private property, the city will address the entire tree. We have a history of pulling trees off of cars, off of houses, just in an effort to get the storm damage cleaned up. At the same time, if a private tree falls into the right-of-way, we will cut that tree at the property line and take care of the part of the tree that has impacted the right-of-way, and what is still left in private property is up for the private property owner to deal with. It is their responsibility at that point. We have tried several different ways to communicate this over the years. We've developed graphics like this one. This is the newest updated version of this graphic to try to help people understand what we, the city, will address when we come by and what we won't. We also ask that people don't pile branches from private trees into the right-of-way during our cleanup efforts. This makes a little bit of confusion for our teams as far as, are we supposed to pick up this pile? Is it our responsibility to do it? Is it not? Completely understand from the homeowner's point of view as well that when you're cleaning up your own property and you're staging this to load into a trailer or a truck, that is absolutely the best place to do it because it's the easiest access for you, but at the same time it makes things a little bit confusing for us. One of the things, especially in smaller events, that we also ask of the citizens if they can help us out a little bit. If it's a small branch that comes down out of a right-of-way tree, if it's less than 6 feet long, if it's less than 6 inches in diameter or about the size of a coffee can, we ask them to, hopefully they've got the ability to take care of it themselves and help us, help them. Of course, if they can't, understand that completely as well. And we still do address those issues as well. Communication of this process, not only from the Helpline Center, or if calls come into Public Works, or if calls come into Parks and Recreation, our teams can answer those questions and provide that information to the community as we go. So in a typical response, once we get, of course, these storms seem to happen at night. So we call on our teams in the middle of the night to come and address this. We start with our forestry team, and then we supplement as necessary with people who have what I'll call park responsibilities or other responsibilities within the park system that aren't forestry related, but still have that skill set and can help us do that. And that's kind of our initial response to help try to get things started before we get into the next business day and we can get the full forestry crew on and in motion and help with some other teams. That forestry team, that storm damage team that's up here, essentially is our entire forestry crew, which is 8 full-time employees, and our 2 equipment operators that help with the loading and the hauling of some of this debris. So that's 10 full-time employees that we dedicate to this storm damage response. Now, while that team is working on that, we of course have people within the park system who are dealing with storm damage to the parks. McKinnon Park was only fortunate during one of these events, and that happened to be the Memorial Day event, but in the other 2 events was hit pretty heavily with some tree damage and some other infrastructure damage to that park. So then we call on each other to help out within the park system to help get the stuff that we can without the expertise and the equipment that the forestry crew typically has and is using on the streets to get the street stuff cleaned up first. Also, to give you a bit of an idea of what else is going on within the park system, between the May 12th event and the July 5th event, we supported 18 baseball and softball tournaments, mostly at Harmadon and Sherman Parks. That does take a significant effort for us to support those tournaments and those other events, and so those teams really need to be back in their locations to support, you know, the typical day-to-day stuff of what their responsibilities are. Also, the Memorial Day event that happened 4 days before we opened all of our aquatic facilities. So of course those teams really aren't available to help so much with the storm cleanup as they need to make sure that we're ready to provide that aquatic experience and recreational opportunities across the park system. But also to give you a bit of an idea of some of the operational impacts for, you know, what is the forestry team not doing while we spent the last month and a half working on storm damage. Well, through our Emerald Ash Borer response plan, we've got a bunch of ash tree stumps out there that we are definitely trying to ground and get out of the way so that our citizens can then go back and fill in with black dirt and reseed their boulevard so that they've got, you know, instead of a tree stump, they've got some nice grass in front of their house, or maybe they're ready to replant a tree. So that activity was postponed, of course, during our response. And then Project Trim compliance trimming was also postponed. It's just, you know, we're prioritizing the storm damage, making sure that we can get all of that stuff done and cleaned up and get everybody back to, you know, to life as normal. You know, there are some parts of the city, my neighborhood, which happens to be a newer neighborhood, really didn't see any storm damage. So in my neighborhood, it's been life as normal all summer long. However, we know that there are some places that have been impacted with each one of these storms. So we prioritize through our prioritized hazard assessment ratings, making sure that we open up the streets for emergency vehicles, and we work on property damage, and then we go on down the list from there to make sure that people have access to their properties, as well as getting the storm cleaned up and getting things done as we can. So that's it for Parks and Recreation, and I will now turn it over to Dustin Hanson with Public Works.
Good afternoon, Dustin Hanson with Public Works. Of course, like Regan said, every storm is different. It impacts Public Works in all different ways. Of course, like winter events, street team that's our #1 priority. For these events, we've got other priorities in spring, summer, and fall. But as far as, you know, when the storms hit, you know, we typically respond within minutes, hours if not minutes. We're trying to clear the streets for those emergency vehicles. And if once we can start doing that, we start hauling debris off to our tree sites. As far as these events where we have high winds, the light and power division, the traffic division, of course, down light poles, power poles, wires, things of that nature. So they're drastically impacted there. Of course, our landfills, of course, impacted with having to set up the tree debris sites. And that's one advantage that we have here in Sioux Falls is we own and operate our own landfill, that we can set up these sites, we can waive the tipping fees for this tree debris, so that's a huge advantage for us. But some of the impacts for the street division, we typically fill 150 to 200 potholes a week So anytime we pull our crews off there, that's that many potholes that are not getting filled. We have an asphalt overlay program that typically starts in May and ends in typically November. We'll put anywhere from 30 to 40,000 tons of asphalt out a year. If we have, within 1 week, that could be 1,500 tons. That could be 7 to 10 blocks streets that don't get paved. And so it's very critical. We have a small window from May to November when our hot plants are open. And of course, we also have weather events that keep us from paving. So that's a huge issue. And of course, street sweeping, anytime we get storms, we pull away from our regular street sweeping. We go into sweeping debris, things of that nature. So we're drastically impacted when we have these events. But street team typically has the most resources in the city. We can throw anywhere from 40 to 50 dump trucks, side dumps, loaders with grapples, and we can get stuff done in a hurry. But it is a huge impact to our operation. So with that, our team will take any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the counselors on the phone. Do you have any questions? Hearing none. Counselor Jensen.
Thank you, Chair Sale. I just want to thank each one of you for coming up and presenting that and getting that out in the public. And I know you are going to be working on that as storms continue to come up and happen. And Regan, maybe this is for you, but if you go to that picture again where the right-of-way is, and this is one of the conversation points that we had in our meeting when Kurt and I were getting up to speed on it. But as you get onto the private property, especially in a big storm, you said to me that if you go and take the additional piece of that tree, then FEMA funds would not apply to that, and that would be a compliance violation, correct?
It depends. We would need to get prior approval from FEMA to start collecting that private debris. And we only received the declaration about less than 10 days ago, so that wouldn't have been possible in this event. But if it is a significantly large event, we can get that prior approval so they understand what our debris plan is and approve it, and then we could collect from the curbside on that. So
right.
On those ones that impact the whole community, absolutely, that's the most efficient way to do it and to resolve those issues, and it's a health issue for not only the city, but residents too.
Right, there's always a thought process behind your guys' planning, and I appreciate that.
Right.
And I thought that was a big takeaway from our meeting prior to this, so I'm glad that that's out there. So now you take the rest of the tree in the homeowner's responsibility, and the homeowner can, pay whoever they want, or they can call 211 as well. And 211, how many tickets did 211 clear in some of those terms? Can you give us a little idea about that? Because they are successful in helping this community, and most people can have access to a 211 number.
Yeah, they assisted 93 homeowners so far at this point.
It's outstanding. So thank you for that. And there's always more help out there, and private citizens can help and get volunteering in those ways, and that will help you guys, pave your potholes and do everything else that you guys talked about as your priorities, because it's always about balancing our priorities. And I think that you individuals do a good job of that. So I keep up the strong work, and we'll continue to push you. And I know that you guys always have reasons for why you do things. So thank you very much, and keep up the strong work. Thanks, Chair.
Counselor Bronco.
Just for folks who might be watching on television, is there a policy right now for storm debris drop-off? Is that those fees been waived? Is that still being accepted?
Yes, till the end of this month, the public drop-off sites, the one at Lyons at the fairgrounds is open, and no tipping fees at the landfill. There's also down in between Sioux Falls and Harrisburg at Muller Pallets, they've agreed to accept those too. So through the end of July, again, free drop-off sites, and that's a good resource for residents to take care of it.
Excellent. One other thing so that I can understand better. When in one of these storms, when a tree falls and it falls onto the power line, obviously it's a bad situation, a dangerous situation. What entity or department is primarily responsible for getting that cleared?
Well, usually the utility works.
Utility is?
Works through that. There might be a situation where they work with city crews, in that first phase, if it's during that emergency phase,
Right.
but after that, we rely on the utility, whether it's, City of Sioux Falls or XL Energy.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Counselor McCarris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question might be for Director Pritchett. I believe he's in the crowd. Just wondering, on the finances that we're seeing here, the cost of the cleanup, is there any sense at all how much that's going to be supplemental versus how much of this is going to be they're cutting expenses in other areas of their budget and it's going to be covered by the approved budget already?
At this time, I'm not aware of any request for a supplement, but we're kind of at that stage of the year where we start projecting out what the rest of the year is going to look like. And so there may be, as we kind of assess what that looks like, there may be some requests that come forward, but there's nothing that's been imminent yet.
Thank you. Next question, I think, is somewhat related to the drop-off sites, and just wondering what the experience has been on, has there been challenges where there's been non-staffed drop-off versus staffed drop-off sites? So has it always been staffed when the drop-off sites are open, or have we tried non-staffed drop-off sites as well? Like when I drop off out at Mueller Pallets, for example, there's no one there watching me. When I go to the city drop-off sites, I got somebody watching over me.
Yeah, I can't speak for Mueller Pallets, but I can speak for our sites, and we typically have one person there, if not 3 or 4, directing traffic, running the loaders to kind of push up the piles, things of that nature. So we typically like to have ours staffed when they're open.
And Mr. Chair, one more comment, if I'm able. Comment / then larger term question. Comment, I've been doing a lot of tree pickup with the Helpline and just can't speak enough of the good work the Helpline did. I think from the first storm of the tornado multiple years ago to where they're at today, I can just speak from personal experience that their responsiveness of getting me the volunteer information, like literally 10 minutes, you submit your name, I've got 6 addresses in my phone, go to these 6 spots and pick it up. So I just want to congratulate the Helpline, and I think we need to remember them as a partner as we're looking at our budget and so forth, that they play a big role in our community in a variety of ways. So I appreciate the work that the Helpline did. I'm going to ask this next question, then I'm going to duck really quick and not expect an answer today, but I'm asked about it in the public a lot. And that's the question regarding tornado sirens. I know we're talking about storm debris cleanup right now, but I don't want to get into the details of the tornado siren policy right now. I just want to understand from a legislative body what our role is in the policy making, who sets that policy, so when we get asked that question, we can communicate directly with our constituents saying, hey, this is who sets that policy, and this would be the process for engaging discussion about it.
I would say at this point, the administration sets that. I'm not, obviously, you'd have to consult the attorneys as far as what your role might be there, but the administration sets that. I take into advice from the mayor's office, police chief, fire chief, Metro Communications, and then I work closely with my counterparts at Minnehaha and Lincoln County Emergency Management in making those decisions. And then obviously working very close with the National Weather Service and other entities over the years as we look at these events and formulate those policies.
I just wanted to understand better, and so appreciate that and look forward to conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilor Neitzer?
My only question is related to the cost history. So in the 2013 and 19, you were talking about on the order of over $1 million or several $1 million, and then these are 100,000 or 200,000. Was that literally just the scale of the events, or did something operationally change?
Literally the scale of the events, the 2013, just the volume, obviously, and how widespread it was. The 2013 and 2019 events, we did use local contractors for both events, and then a national contractor that was significant in the 2013 ice storm.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I've just maybe got one, but I'll preface it with, Counselor Jensen and I called Public Works and also the Emergency Management and Parks and said, how's this working? We're getting calls as council members that our logs aren't being picked up, our trees aren't picking up. So this was an educational process that Counselor Jensen and I went through, and we thought it was important enough to bring to the council and also to the public on how that works. One of the big things that I did learn that a lot of the policies are set because of FEMA reimbursement and the complexity of what that goes on. So if somebody would like to talk about how the declaration from FEMA comes about, how the process is for us to submit, and how long it takes to get that money back.
That would be mine. Yes, so basically it typically starts off with local entities, cities, townships, ask for a state of emergency. We request the county commission. In this case, it was just Minnehaha County. There wasn't much damage south of 57th Street, so requested Minnehaha County to make that declaration. They make that to the governor, as do other county commissions across the state. The state and FEMA come and take a look at what are those damages. We're continually, as you saw with the view works, we're collecting that information instantaneously to do that damage assessment, and working now closely with the Helpline Center to have residents report that also, both on the public assistance side and the individual assistance side. State and federal take a look, determine whether it is eligible per their regulations, and then there are thresholds that each county and the state must meet, and if those are met, then the governor can make that request to the president. That may take some time to hear back from Washington on that. It did this time. And then once we get that declaration, the applicants start meeting with FEMA and the state inspectors, go through all of their processes. Our finance team has gotten really good at collecting and gathering and documenting all of the, whether it's city labor, equipment, our contracts, those type of things, going through those, and then they start awarding those. But it can literally take, on the permanent work, it can take 2 to 3 years to be reimbursed, because we've obviously got to do the work. But for things like debris management, this will be fairly quick and easy for us. I would think within a year we'll have it closed out with FEMA. But then there's a long term, we have to hold on to that documentation for about 5 years. So we've got offices full of tubs and things like that in case we're audited moving forward. So it is a long-term process, and a lot of eyes look at it from Pierre to Denver to Washington, and it can get kicked back to us, and we have to justify it all the way.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate all the hard work and the education that you've given to the council and to the public on this. I think it really helps. Let's hope we don't have to talk about it again in the future. That being said, we'll move on to our next segment. Public comment. This time, anybody who wishes to speak on either one of these presentations, please come forward.
Scott Harrisman, Sioux Falls. On the parking ramp, I actually thought we were going to get an apology today, but I guess not. What you should be looking at is it's called a building ramp. You can look up online. There's tons of pictures of them. They do them all over the world. They normally do them on parking ramps because parking ramps are ugly. And they're temporary. They can be changed. You can sell advertising. You could pay for the whole thing. You could wrap the whole building in a building wrap. Painting, as an artist, myself, I go and spend time, even if I'm getting paid to do it, to paint on this building. And then eventually it might get covered up. Well, how does that make me feel as an artist? I would say you should do a building wrap. You could do it, on the top part down and around the sides, and then you could have a spot where stuff could be painted. I suggest you do something like they do it in Rapid City. They have a graffiti. Anybody can go in there and paint as long as it's not, whatever. You don't need to do a request for a proposal for somebody to come paint a mural. But I'm glad that you're going to do something with it and put a park there And, there was a mention about the RFP process. The problem was the RFP process wasn't broken when this whole thing came about. Government was broken. Should have never gotten approved. It just should have never gotten approved. The process of RFP was not broken. Because when you don't do an RFP, you're leaving the council out, you're leaving the public out, you're leaving the planning board out, and you're letting the mayor's office decide who's going to be put in their building there. And you're left completely out of the negotiation. Just look at the apartments that are going to be built across the street from Ace Hardware downtown. You guys had nothing to do with that. You were said, this is what we're going to do, and you're going to do it. Negotiated sale. Like I said, the process was not broken. Voting for this was broken. Government screwed up. As for the storm cleanup and stuff, you guys need to put together a long-term plan for this. It's going to get worse. Global warming has been around for a long time. It's going to get worse, it's going to get worse, it's going to get worse. We can't just keep reacting to these things. You got to have a plan. Rich McCorris brought up a great question about the sirens. I do think you should change the policy for high winds. Those sirens should go off. And you are the policy body. It's in the charter. You guys write the policy, not the mayor's office. He can submit stuff to you, but that's your job. You guys could bring an ordinance forward that says we will turn those sirens on when there's high winds. That's your job. You're the policy body. That's who does it. But what we have now is a mayor's office that makes all the policy, hands it over to you, and you guys rubber stamp it. That's not how it should be done. And I think it's serious. I think those sirens should go off when there's high winds. Somebody says, well, people get complacent. Well, that's weird. Why do people pull over for fire trucks and police cars? Why do people stop at trains? Oh, I don't know, because they have sirens. Do people ignore that? No. That was one of the stupidest excuses I've ever heard. People are going to become complacent of a tornado siren. As for those numbers that we were presented, I don't believe those. With all the labor and all the parks and all the trees down in the parks, all I've seen the Parks Department do since last week was clean up branches. That's it. That's all I've seen them do. All the workers are cleaning up branches. You're telling me all those labor hours, all those tree cleanup is $100,000 or $200,000? No way. That's a complete joke. You know, it's funny. We have money for ice ribbons, butterflies, colleges, movie theaters, tennis courts, you name it, but we don't have any money to clean up storm damage. Unbelievable. We're destitute when it comes to that. We should be cleaning up this. People should be able to put the stuff in the boulevard and the city should be picking it up. And one more thing, as a policy body, you guys should consider. Stop planting trees in the boulevard. There needs to be a city ordinance, no trees in the boulevard. None. They end up in the street. We found that out. Everyone and they mess with utilities too. But yeah, you guys got a lot of work to do, and I'm glad we had this presentation today. Thank you.
Anyone else for public input? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.